get me wrong, it ain't all bad. I love the crazy fads, like England always buggering up. But you know we're gonna win the World Cup. I'm gonna start me own nation with myself and reservation. I'm gonna start me own nation with myself and reservation.
Keep the red flag flying here.
And welcome, politicos, to yet another edition. Paul isn't here, so I can't ask him what number it is. Both he and Laura are feeling under the weather. We send them our best wishes. This is, I think, the first time that we haven't had a daily on the show. And we're all sort of suffering some kind of shock from that. So we wish them every recovery, and God bless you both. However, politicos, I have three fabulous people. When Marcus stepped in at the last minute, I mean, these are wonderful people, and let's hear what they've had to say about our questions today. Let's welcome them. Mark, thank you so much for turning up. God bless you.
That's fine. I used to be a sixth man when I used to play basketball, always the guy who used to be on the court off the bench. So I'm used to jumping in when needed.
Well, thank you, but you're not the reserve. You're one of our first team, and thank you for coming to play with us today. And then Kerry, God bless you. Hello, thank you so much.
Hiya, John. Are you all right? Yeah, there's not much going on in my house tonight, so I'll be focusing on the screen, not trying to serve my kids the tea.
Sorry. Your light on as well. We can see.
Oh, no, I've got my big light on.
Wonderful. And finally, Miss Brainbox herself, Jane Strange.
Hello.
Political unmuted answer to that. What's the name on Countdown? Anyway,
Carol Vorderman.
Yeah,
I'll go with Carol.
She'll do.
Oh, we won't go
thank you for being on the show. Start with moment of the week. Mark, your moment of the week.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of things I could pick, which unfortunately would crash with the questions we're going to ask. But I'm kind of hope that I'm not going to kind of break moment of the week because it's not technically happened, but I want to kind of like flag it to you all. And that is Bernie Sanders has got the major insulin providers, Eli Lilly, Novo Nordisk, and Sanofi to come into the into Congress to testify about the cost of insulin. For those of you who don't know, up until a couple of months ago, a bottle like that, which is 10 milligrams, would cost an American who hadn't got insurance $300. We've talked about that before, but a couple of months ago they felt the burn, and they now made it $30. But he still said, "Tough, you're coming in, you're going to talk about this." Let's remember Banting said, "Insulin does not belong to me; it belongs to the world." And what this group who make this T-shirt, T1 International, they've got three questions for Lilly, Novo Nordisk, and Sanofi, and I think they're pretty good. Do you believe access to affordable insulin, let's say affordable healthcare, because they all do a lot other than just insulin, is a human right? And you just lowered some of your prices despite saying that you never could. What shifted? While you provide some insulin at lower costs to patients around the world, will you ensure that no one will go bankrupt or lose their life because insulin is not affordable? Now, apparently in England, before the NHS, they did have an act to provide insulin for free, as in buy our taxes. Before the NHS was, I didn't realise one of the Tories yelled at me once when I was talking about this. But I think it's cool. If you want to watch it, go check out T1 International, and they've got a link so you can watch it live. It will be at 1 p.m. Eastern time. Now, I'm not quite good on changing in the times, but I think that's about 5 hours. So it'll roughly be 6 p.m. our time, I believe.
Thank you for that momentous moment, because my late wife was diabetic, and this is a very important issue. It's a matter of life. This is a matter of life and death, isn't it?
I can only live 24 hours without insulin, and by the end of the 12th hour, I will be in a coma.
Yeah.
By the 24th, more than likely dead. So that's the thing.
Thank you. Can I share Politico's? No, it's Justicios we call them, isn't it? Oh, it was me that wanted Politicos. That you can sneak it in eventually if you know people. Anyway, Justicios. Leanne, my moment of the week is a meeting I just attended with people living in Gaza and hearing firsthand their absolutely horrific experiences. On this Nakba, we say never forget Free Palestine. God bless you, Leanne. That is such a critical issue. I'm very personally committed to it. I do everything I can within my limited abilities. God bless you for doing that. Yes, Free Palestine. Marcus Smith wants to be added to the group as insulin, maybe something she may need. Neil Terry, my moment of the week was seeing the Peace Gardens in Sheffield absolutely packed with one person celebrating the coronation in the rain. Yeah, he put a photograph on Facebook, and there was all these chairs set out and all this stuff at the front, and then a screen, and just one person sat there. Kirsty Smith, my moment of the week was seeing my local Tory MP bewildered as to why they did so badly. Well, we're going to be talking about that in a little while. Jane, moment of your week.
So my moment of the week was reading the letter that Julian Assange wrote to the new king over the weekend and published, which revealed some really horrible details about what life is like in Belmarsh prison, but also just really important to remember that Julian Assange is in Belmarsh prison and that he shouldn't be in prison, and that his imprisonment threatens all of our freedom and democracy and is an absolute travesty, and he needs to be freed now.
Thank you for reminding us of that. I noticed that as well. And if Charles wanted to do one thing, it might well be to make an intervention on behalf of Julian Assange. It might change my opinion on the role of the monarchy. Carrie, your moment of the week.
Well, I've got this moment of the week from TikTok because I haven't watched any of the coronation drivel. About Rishi Sunak at yesterday's Windsor Castle party. And he remember the Theresa May moment when she come out with the ABBA song and walking on stage as though she was a plank of wood. He gave Theresa May a run for his money. He was literally as though he was like a puppet. He was like this, and it just made me laugh. And I think that it proven that how much out of touch he is in this country, the way he was going on. He didn't even have a clue how to dance, let alone just like this. It just made me laugh. That's my moment of the week. He gives Theresa May a run for her money.
I mean, it's embarrassing, isn't it? But the sort of it's just a sort of a sign of how far away from being normal these people are, isn't it?
Yeah, I've got a big, massive, life-size, cutout of Rishi Sunak. And if I got my life-size cutout and moved it from side to side, that would be Rishi Sunak dancing. Oh, with a Union Jack in his hand, dancing from side to side. He didn't even have a clue how to dance. And the teeth, you're just a bit like, are you a puppet or what? He totally put Theresa May to shame in her ABBA dancing.
Come back, Theresa, all is forgiven. We'll organise a field of wheat for you to run through. Okay. God bless. Let's move on. Let's move on to the big story.
Now it's time for the big story.
And the big story today has to be the local elections, unfortunately. Mark, a disastrous night for the Tories. What do you think those results mean for the Tory party in general and Sunak in particular? You've muted, Mark.
Sorry, the joys of Zoom. It's always muted. I wish there was an auto thing you could just, as soon as you started, it would stop with that. But then you'd get more loads of other stuff. But anyway, the elections. What an interesting night. What a collapse from the Tories. And I think that's a story that we must keep on about. It's not been a big night for Labour. We'll leave that to one side. So they did the same as Corbyn did, really, in 2018. But sorry, I hope I haven't stolen anybody's thunder with that. But it was a bad night for sorry, but it was a bad night for the Tories. They basically got wiped out, and it's got to be seen that culture wars. Nobody is bothered. People are worried about the cost of living and the way this country is moving towards a dictatorship. And that's what the Tories need to do now. Obviously, there is going to be spin. We're going to see people will say, bring back Boris. Well, if you want to kill the Tories, be my guest. Bring him back. But it is just definitely not working. They do not have a clue. Somebody please throw in a towel for them. It's just not working for them. They just haven't got a clue. I don't know who does, but with a chance at the moment, I've got an idea, but he doesn't. He's a bit of an outsider at the moment.
Go on, spill the beans. Who?
JC, the JC of the South, Mr. Clare. I think, but hopefully he will be gaining his troops together, and we're waiting for the call.
I'll come back to you on that if it's all right. Let's talk about the Tories for just a little bit longer. I mean, the Tories are usually so good at pitching their election and bringing out the faithful. It failed last week. I mean, why? I mean, Greg Hands went on and on and on about that. The letter, there's no money left. Sort of, you're absolutely right. They ran the culture wars thing, and it didn't win. Now, is this just a sign that they've lost touch with their constituency, or is it something deeper?
I think they've lost touch. Let's talk about that. That letter from is it Ian? Was it Ian? No, it's not Ian Byrne. What was it?
Liam Byrne.
Liam Byrne. That's the one who's a Coventry MP. That is a traditional letter that people of his level always leave for the outgoing party. It's just credit to old David Cameron. He picked it up. It is a standard British joke that the leaving secretary leaves for the next one. Finally, somebody created it, but I bet the Tories won't do it this year. When they go out of tradition, they're just, nobody's bothered about votes. They're bothered about eating. They want to eat.
I mean, I read one thing that said that the Tories are running out of money as well. That the donations are drying up.
Well,
I mean, have you heard anything?
Well, they get more money from people who are dead than alive, and what can you expect? The donations are drying up. I know a lot of political parties are, it's finding people who are willing to fund these things.
Yeah, I mean, the worry is that, not the worry, the hope is, I suppose, that this is people who would have put money in expecting something out of the incoming government and realise that money is going to be wasted. They're not going to. There's going to be no return on that money because this is the party that's not going to be elected. Jane, does all this mean that we can look forward to a Labour government? Perhaps that's perhaps the wrong phrase. We can expect a Labour government at the next election.
I wouldn't say it's a sure thing for Labour. I think Labour need to rely on the Tories continuing to be incredibly unpopular, which is very likely because I feel with their austerity policies over the last 13 years, they've absolutely tanked our economy and milked all of our public services for everything they've got. Everything's on its knees. So I can't imagine what wave of prosperity can logically fall upon us that can, improve their standing, improve the economy and improve people's lives. However, there are big world events that happen, and things like coronations. There have been studies that show that they tend to make people feel a little bit more nationalistic and a little bit more leaning towards the kind of things that the Tories like to play upon. Wars are terrible, terrible things, and they do happen, and they change people's feelings, and they make people vulnerable to being manipulated by governments into thinking things they wouldn't otherwise think. Obviously, there's the ongoing situation in the Ukraine, and our government's shown a strong interest in that. And I feel has used that to a large extent to try to justify some of their nastiness, trying to use people like Zelensky to boost their standing as decent people, whilst they talk about, sending innocent, vulnerable people to Rwanda. So I think it's unlikely that the Tories will do very well at the next election, but I don't think there's any real strong reasons for people to vote for Labour. So what we saw in these elections, like Mark said, they did about as well as Corbyn did. But Corbyn increased the Labour vote based on a wave of hope. And there was a lot of enthusiasm, and there were a lot of people who wanted to get involved in that. Whereas I think with Labour at the moment, I don't see any enthusiasm really. I don't know what their policies are. They've got a leader, he keeps on backtracking on things very publicly. And they don't inspire many people with hope, and they've managed to turn a lot of people who in 2015 to 19 were pounding the streets asking people to vote for Labour into active anti-Labour campaigners who have vowed that they will go out and do whatever they can to make sure that this Labour Party doesn't get into government. So what we saw was a really big surge for the Green Party and the Lib Dems, I thought. When you think that the Greens gained nearly half as many new councillors as Labour did, and Labour had 29 times as much in donations over the last year or two, I think, than the Green Party did. That's phenomenal for them to have done that. I think the Greens only managed to stand candidates in about 41% of seats, but did really well, and the Lib Dems as well. And if you add their gains together between them, they did better than Labour did in terms of the increase in their numbers. So that's quite telling.
I mean, both Leanne and Kirsty on the chat are saying that what we saw was not Labour preparing to move into government, but people losing faith in the two-party system, the two-party system crumbling. I mean, to what extent would you agree with that?
I really hope so. I don't think we're there yet, but I desperately wish that we were. But I think we made really good progress in that in these elections, and the local elections last year as well showed the same trend, breaking down some boundaries and getting, a lot more, especially Green councillors into councils. So, but I think on a turnout ranging from 18 to 32%, I mean, that's really sad. There were places where the council was elected based on 18% of people going out to vote, which means that over 80% weren't able to, weren't interested, thought no one had anything to offer for them. So over 80% of the people in that place had no part in electing. So, reasonably, feasibly in those places, you've got councillors elected on the basis of, 10% or less of the population there voting for them, which explains a lot, I think.
Well, we'll be talking to Kerry about that in a little while. It's disappeared. It's dropped off the bottom of the chat. One of the justicios, you know who you are. One of the justicios sort of said that what's happening is that the Tories are losing donors because they're switching to the safe Labour Party. And I mean, I'm reminded today, I was talking to somebody today and sort of saying basically the choice that in the two-party system is that you can vote for the establishment party or you can vote for the other establishment party. And one of the things that the Greens did so well on so little was because actually they had some principles that people agreed with. And so the people said, I like those principles, I'm going with that party. And so, I mean, do you think that Labour would do better if they actually had some principles to campaign on?
I do, absolutely. It's what people desperately need. We need leaders who are brave enough to stand up and have values and principles and lead the way, not people who are dishonest and change their mind on a whim. We need people with values, people who treat other human beings with decency, not the bullying, nasty tactics that we've seen from people senior in the Labour Party in the last few years.
Thank you, Jane. Harry, I mean, your question was sort of, do these results have any implications for local politics in general? These were the local elections. I mean, have they taught us anything about, forgetting the politics of it, have these elections told us anything about local politics?
Well, in 2019, I was a branch secretary and I had 2 wards. And Draker and Cleveland Council lost an abomination amount of councillors. And then this time round, obviously, I'm not a branch secretary. The 3 councillors who were elected in 2019, it's gone from 3 Labour stronghold councillors to 1 Labour and now 2 Tory councillors. So how bad is that, in my opinion? Then I think that
against the tide, really.
It's massively against the tide, and I promised myself I wouldn't do it going down, knocking and helping anybody. But I went out on Thursday to help one of my friends who got elected, funny enough, on Friday, and I went out on Thursday in their ward, and they wanted a local Labour government, like a local Labour ran council, but they said in the general election, like if a general election was called soon, they couldn't vote for Keir Starmer because he's so bland. He's got nothing to offer. It's like watching paint dry. Where before in 2019, people used to say about Corbyn and Brexit, where now people are saying about Keir Starmer and he's bland and he doesn't offer anything. He doesn't offer an alternative to what the Tories are offering now. And that's what they were saying, but they want a Labour-led council because of what the Indies done. But it was like quite refreshing, but not to the fact of where they couldn't vote for a Labour government, such as a general election. And it's ironic that we gained a councillor when so many wards lost last time round. But this time round, we've got 2 Tories and 1 Labour councillor. And I find that like crazy. I genuinely do. And I think that on national politics, the Labour Party need to step up their game. Otherwise, they're not going to get anywhere in the general election. But it's been good for them. But to be honest, I'm not being funny. What's the alternative to the Tories? There's no alternative, is there, really? There was no Green candidate here or anything like that. And there's no alternative. So no wonder so many people voted Labour in the local elections, because what's the alternative? Voting more Tories in about what they're doing nationally. So Labour think
Harry,
they've done
talk
this
to me about voter
thing.
ID. Do you think voter ID and the fact that many voters were turned away, do you think that had any effect at all?
Massively, because I actually took my polling card. Well, it wasn't a card this time, it was in an envelope, wasn't it? Normally you get a card. Then I had to search through my unopened letters to find it. And I searched through my unopened letters to find it. And normally I don't take it. I just say Kerry Wilkes, whatever. But I took my polling paper and my ID. And my old IDs are my old name, my old previous known name, like my surname. And they couldn't find me on the paper for ages. Then the lad looked at my passport, and it wasn't even actually in my like legitimate name. It was in my old name, and they weren't bothered. But I know of a lot of people who got turned away because of they never had the right ID. I mean, I'll use one example, like the Oyster card. If you have an Oyster card, like just our age rate, but if you have like an OAP Oyster card, you could use that as an ID. So why couldn't anyone under 60 use that as an ID? It was just a bit crazy, if I'm honest. But the turnout in my local area was better for this time round than it was previous. The turnout was better. And we've got rid of Andy Preston in Middlesbrough.
Yes, it's not all bad news.
No.
I said I was going to come back to you, Mark, and just ask one question before we move on. What was this about Jeremy Corbyn? Do you know something that we don't know?
I don't know anything, but I hope he's. I know a lot of people. I mean, a lot of people say, "Oh, leave the Labour Party," but to go where at the moment? And my red lines are the Labour unions, so Unite, etc., and the actual and hopefully the Socialist Campaign Group. Now we've seen that. Obviously, Diane's been had the whip withdrawn. Who's next? My gut feeling will be it will either be John McDonnell or Richard Bergen. Those are the two I believe it will be. But anything could change. But I don't know anything. But I do hope that he's not going to go without a fight, and he's the man we're all looking to. Is he going to be the leader? Like Paul said, I don't think he will be the leader. But I think he'll be in the vehicle as Paul. Watched the last Political Unmuted of 2022. Excuse me. He said that there. I just don't know. I think Corbyn is right. Everybody says, "Oh, start a party." As soon as he starts a party, it's going to be like all the aircraft guns in effect are going to be onto him. So he's going to keep it to the last minute. But I think we have to watch, and I don't know anything. I don't know if the dailies are watching in the background. They might know more. I don't know. Paul said some interesting things last week. We've just got to hope. But until we've got something, which there's many parties out there, but none have succeeded. And I think it's the unions are going to be the people that keep the Labour Party together. When they tap out and go, that's the time to watch. And I do know Unite. And can I just quickly jump this in? Because I know we shouldn't. We talked about Kirsty and I, we were all talking about it last week in the chat. Apologies to those of you in the show. But about the political vote for Labour, for Unite. I put my yes vote in the morning. It's not about supporting Labour. That will happen, whatever. This is about other things. Obviously, we can't. I personally voted yes, socialist think tank. That is not socialist think tank, that's me. But if you don't, in your unions, when that comes up every 10 years, you are literally cutting the balls off your union. Because otherwise it just happens with what they do to Labour. Kirsty's obviously a better person, and I hope that people like Kirsty in the Unite community. Now, I was a member of Amicus, which was one of the founding members of Unite. And I want to say here now, Sharon Graham, Kirsty and the members in Unite community are just as important as any of us in Unite Finance. That's because that's going to be where the unions come is not going to be just one trade, and that's what Unite is. It's a multi-trade union. Sorry to jump in with that.
No, thank you very much indeed. Absolutely the right thing to say. Neil Terry asks, how different would the political landscape be if we had PR? Well, it'd be the end of the Labour Party for a start, because many more people would start voting for a realistic socialist alternative. I don't agree with you, Kirsty. Kirsty's complaint against the Labour Party was they had no policies. I did try and advocate for some decent Labour Party this end, but without any pledges. Well, JC pledges were clear and people liked them. I don't think Jeremy Corbyn, the manifesto under Jeremy Corbyn was clear at all. I thought it was huge, so huge that people couldn't encompass it. And then towards the end, they just got desperate and they were throwing in everything. And sort of, I could have lived with those 10 pledges of Starmer if Starmer had actually not reneged on every single damn one. There was some good stuff in those 10 pledges. But I agree with you that what we need is some clear principled socialist pledges, democratic socialist pledges that the party will campaign on. And we can say we're a party principle and there's some reason to vote Labour. Well, Kirsty, you know so much more than me, so you're welcome to disagree if you want. And Laura Daly. So Neil Terry is advertising with banners held high at Wakefield this weekend. You gotta go. I can't, unfortunately. I'm helping my son build his extension, putting the Velux windows in his extension. So I shall be doing the heavy lifting. But the rest of you can go. It's an absolutely great event. Well recommended.
I'd love to go. But unfortunately, the only way to get through Wakefield from Wolverhampton is the train, and we've got to show solidarity to the RMT. But we've got Katie Fitzgerald, the amazing Katie Fitzgerald, and I'm trying to remember the lineup. And I think there was a festival you wanted to mention, wasn't there, as well, John?
No, that was it.
Oh, right.
That was it.
Oh.
My blind is coming down. That strange noise in the background is not me having problems with my stomach. It's the blind coming down.
You haven't provoked your electronic servant, have you, John?
Don't mention her name. Don't mention
that name, which we shall not
mention. No. The blinds are the thing that they automatically come down at sundown. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, to your comments. Absolutely smashing. Let's move on. Well, the coronation swamped all the rest of the news, I thought, during the weekend. I thought it was horrific, but there we go. But there was one thing which it didn't swamp because it was part of the coronation, and that was the way that the protesters were treated by the Met Police. The Republic protesters were treated. Let's ask Kerry all about it. Kerry, tell us about the countdown on protests. What do you think it means for our democracy?
It's mutant democracy, isn't it, really? I mean, I've seen loads of things all over Twitter and social media and in the media in general about all these people in the yellow were protesting Not My King. They put like big boards all around them so they couldn't be seen, didn't they? And like Jane said earlier about people ranting rape alarms and that out there, the arrested people, like who they're seen as the hierarchy of these like protesting groups and that, and they weren't actually found guilty of anything, and they were just trying to silence like democracy, in my opinion. And the Met Police, the most corrupt organisation, arresting people like for peaceful protests. Well, they weren't even allowed to have a peaceful protest. They weren't allowed to protest at all. Like, it's dictatorship, isn't it? If you don't salute the king or swear to his allegiance and all that, you have to be muted. Where like the polls and everything say that a lot of people in this country are against the monarchy and the coronation. And I think it's morally wrong, and we are living in a dictatorship, and they're just trying to preach to us because they don't want to go against whatever. But yeah, it's just wrong. And like this new bill that they're bringing in, like stop it's just getting like, I thought we were in 2023. It seems to be going about 20 years back, like a dictatorship, and I think it's wrong.
It reminded me, or I was reminded of the Sarah Everard protests. It struck me as being very similar. That so these people are undermining the stability of the establishment, and it's the police who go way beyond their mandate.
The Met Police, John, the Met Police, who are the most corrupt, the organisation, the Met Police. They're having to re-vet every police officer and all that. It's the Met, exactly. Like, it's normal. Like, I mean, I know it's happening all over, but the Met, it's like a big scope on London-based, the Met Police, and they're trying to silence people again. Like you've just said there again, Sarah Everard. When something goes against their agenda, they're muting everyone and they don't like it.
Did it backfire on them? I mean, at the end of the day, did the way they dealt with the protesters do more harm to the coronation than good? Because it was on the television throughout the world what they were doing.
I think on the day it didn't, because people weren't really fully aware of it. But now you look at like Sky News, it's been like full of like the arresting of these protesters. It's like being like GMB this morning, and I think it's having more of an impact now. It's not Monday, it's Tuesday, isn't it? Like, I'm all confused with all these bank holidays, sorry. But it, like, to now, it's like hitting home, like how much people are being silenced in this country because of everything that's come out about the coronation. I mean, the boards, I mean, there weren't even 6-foot boards, there were like 12-foot boards put around these protesters, so the cameras couldn't pick them up. And when, like, I go on TikTok again, when you see like the protesting, like TikTok, there was like a good couple of thousand people there protesting against the coronation, and they were muted and silenced. And it goes back again to the mainstream media, doesn't it? Like, the boards are put up so the mainstream media didn't like go against the king's coronation, where I think it's massively backfiring on them now, where like it's continuously being spoken about in the general media about these protesters being silenced. And wasn't there an emergency debate in Parliament today about all this?
No, I don't know about that.
There was some debate about the bill, though. There was some debate about the bill and everything today in Parliament. But yeah, I think that they're trying to silence people who were against the establishment and their agenda, and it's just immorally wrong.
I mean, one thing that was interesting, just before we move on, is Clive Lewis was meant to speak at the rally for Not My King, but the police told him not to go because there was a security worry. Now, I wonder, and I wish Clive's a great person, and personally, if we were to get Starmer out to save the Labour Party, Clive would get my vote, because I think we can't have somebody who is from our side, but he would be the perfect person, in my opinion.
Oh, no.
Okay, well, we'll agree to disagree on that. But could you imagine if Clive had been there and started speaking, they'd have had to arrest him. What would that have done for them if they've arrested an MP in the of the Houses of Parliament?
They wouldn't have done it, though.
I don't know.
So is he causing a nuisance to other people? Is he disrupting events? And it's just one person. One person protest can be regarded as disruptive. Mark, Labour's stance on the protests has come into some criticism. I mean, do you agree?
I think I am a bit 50-50 on this, which is probably not brilliant for this show, but let me explain to you why.
It's exactly what we need, Mark.
So let me explain. A lot of that, I think, came from one person, Cruella de Vil. You know who I mean? Our Home Secretary. I initially thought it was going to be like the gold commander, because basically on these kind of things you have a bronze commander who is on the floor, and then they'll go up to silver, and then the gold, who is the person above it. But I don't think it came from them. It's like the Severard. It came from the Home Secretary to act hard. There's an interesting thing, though, and just then before I go back to your question, how they dealt with the Just Stop Oil campaigners that they arrested. In some ways, that might have been for their own safety, because the people wanted to literally hang them when they were pulling them out, it looked like. But Labour's position, I think, is an interesting one. I think that they should say that it should be withdrawn, but that bill has to come from on high, the actions for it. So if Labour don't use it, it can just sit there and go moribund, if you see what I mean. I think it has to come. I think what happened we saw on Saturday came exactly from Suella Braverman, and she made those calls, and I'll stand correct. I'd love to see them prove me wrong, but I think that's where it came from. So an incoming Labour Party Home Secretary, it's Yvette Cooper at the moment, glory, but it could be. But I do think there should be moves to scrutinise it and remove it. It's very simple. I don't know can anybody tell me in the chat what is a good part of that bill? I don't think there is any. Let's just get rid of it. We don't need it. First bill, if we get a Labour government, should be
that, Matt, was the whole point of my question, because Lammy came on and he said that they weren't going to get rid of it.
I know.
And there's an awful lot of people who, I mean, the bill is an horrific thing. And I just disagree. I mean, I'd be lovely to see what the Justiciar thinks, but I just absolutely disagree with what you were saying about we can just leave it. The bill exists there, and it gives the police powers to act on their own. The policemen in the street, the Met went too far. But the police in the street have massive powers according to this bill. They don't need the Home Secretary to give them the nod. They can, if somebody's passing a demonstration with a bag in their hand, they can stop them and look inside. And if they've got super glue, they can arrest them on the grounds that they were planning to lock on. They have that power as of right. And sort of the ordinary Bobby in the beat can just decide that that's what he's going to do. And the bill needs to go, which is what you've just said, secondly. And sort of where Labour came into criticism, surely, was that for reasons known only to them, they have not said that it will go when they get elected. Now, surely they're wrong there, Mark.
I think they should go, but I can understand what people are thinking. I do think you're right, though, about the locking on thing. I mean, I'm if people want to lock on and get stuck there, that's their business. But you are right. But I can see what some people would say, that it is coming. The marching orders came from the Home Secretary, like I feel they did in the Sarah Everard thing. But as you say, a foul policeman, and it's not just the Met. Let's stop this fire break where we're trying to sacrifice the Met for everybody in the other police forces who are just as bad. It's all of them. It's West Midlands, it's Staffordshire, it's everyone. We know that in Socialist Think Tank because of comrades in it. We can't say any more than that.
Just one last question, Mark. It's sort of Labour South, in the South, the Labour region South, put out a list of 12 bodies, organisations that CLPs are not allowed to affiliate. Now, they've not been prescribed in the way that some of the previous ones were, but you're not allowed to affiliate to them. I mean, is this not just another example of Labour playing at being Tories?
Yeah, totally. I don't like it. I am currently at the moment a branch chair in my CLP, and I don't like it at all. If I want to, you cannot. I believe one of them was the Peace and Justice Project, and also Republic.
Yeah,
several others. It's just trying to worry about the right wing press. We need to be voicing. Forget the right wing press, and we need to be saying that to that's what we as independent media should be doing. We should be saying forget them and get people to listen to us and Socialist Think Tank.
Thank you. God bless you. Jane, what's the future for protest in Britain?
So with this new legislation, it's quite scary. It's very scary, in fact. And I think what it looked like we saw to me on Saturday was that I don't know if they were power hungry or paranoid, but I suspect there's a little bit of both going into it on the part of the Met Police. And that's very frightening because we've already had many cases in this country of the police shooting before they think, and innocent people dying, innocent unarmed people being shot to death. That was before these laws came into place. And just to go back to some of the things that happened on Saturday, I wanted to go back to the Night Stars that were arrested, the 3 volunteers handing out rape alarms. So the Met Police, I think, put out several statements during the day on Saturday justifying those arrests, saying, they'd had intelligence they were going to throw the rape alarms at the police's horses, at the King's horses, or the horses during the parade. These 3 volunteers were walking the streets at 2 a.m. in the morning, handing out rape alarms to people on the streets, amongst other things that they were giving out. And they're actually sponsored by the Met Police, and they were wearing high-vis jackets with Met Police written on the back. So the thought that if you were going to throw rape alarms at the horses in the parade, that the way you do that when the parade starts at 10 in the morning is by loitering the streets of London at 2 a.m. in the morning is absolutely preposterous. And the lack of humility on the part of the police around this, because I think these people too were kept locked up for hours and hours. I think was it about 14 hours? Absolutely ridiculous. And the the Republic group, they had been speaking to the police for 4 months beforehand, arranging this peaceful protest. They didn't just appear, they'd arranged this and made sure they were doing everything lawfully and made it absolutely clear what they were going to do, and that they were, it was a peaceful protest. And yet when they got there, they were arrested and they had their phones confiscated. So I think they were kept incarcerated or locked up for, I think, about 14 hours, and they had their phones confiscated even after they were let free, so that they didn't have access, to their phones, their contacts, their friends and family. They, and also one point that was made was that the media couldn't contact them, and that lots of mainstream media outlets were saying, oh, we did contact them for opinion, but they didn't get back to us. And that was because the police still had their phones, so they couldn't be contacted and get onto their social media or phones. So I thought this was really scary, and there was footage on France 24. I saw this wasn't just in the UK. There's footage, like you say, worldwide that showed this in a very poor light, the way that the protesters were treated. So this really alarms me, and I'm quite worried about it. And I'm even more worried that we've got an opposition party saying that they won't repeal these laws if they get into power.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and we'll uphold that law. They're going to uphold that law. And basically it says to them, sit down, shut up, and do as you're bloody well told. Last question of all. I'm going to go straight back to Jane, because I think Jane will put us right, but I think that the government have taken advantage of us leaving the EU to resume or to take away the ban on animal testing. But I'll stop chuntering. Jane, tell us all about that.
Yeah, so in 1998 in this country, animal testing for cosmetic products and cosmetic ingredients was banned, which I think was a very good thing. It's now come to light that since 1998, this government has been handing out licenses to companies to do cosmetic testing on ingredients for cosmetic products. And they've claimed that this was due to a ruling by the EU Chemicals Agency the year that we left the European Union. When we regained control of our borders and laws, we decided we would contravene this one by allowing the testing of cosmetic ingredients on animals again. So this is really nasty, I think. And the judge who ruled in the case actually said that they didn't see that there was a legal need for the government to have done that, as they're claiming, I think, but it was more of a pragmatic need, that you could read that the two sets of legislation, the European and UK legislation, did work in conjunction with each other. And he also said, the judge, that it was, although what would have been done was legal, it was extremely regrettable that the public had not been told about this. And he mentioned that there's absolutely no reason why the government couldn't reintroduce the ban on animal testing for cosmetic products if they wanted to, which I thought was very important, because it shows to me that this seems to be another ideological decision by this government. It's not something they've needed to do. They're trying to pass it off as that because it's very unpopular, but it's something they want to do for whatever reason. And it really frustrates me, because if you actually look at the scientific reasons why animal testing isn't appropriate, obviously there's the ethical side of it, and it's a very emotive subject when you go outside of cosmetics. I think for cosmetics there's absolutely no justification whatsoever, but even for medicine, and this is something you might be talking about with other people here, the amount of tests that are done on animals that are, for products that are thrown out, I think over 90%, go through all the stages, and then it gets thrown out because animals aren't the same as humans. And there are charities like the Animal Free Research, who are doing testing on what they call human relevant research methods. So I was listening to a podcast earlier on about one of the scientists working with them, who had been working for years using mouse skin to do tests to develop treatments for tumours, and they weren't getting very far. And now they're working with that charity. They've managed to get human skin from people undergoing cosmetic procedures, having facelifts, having tummy tucks, or and so they're using real human skin, and they're making huge progress, because if you take mouse skin, It's got lots more hair follicles on it. Mice don't have sweat glands. They're not humans, and their bodies don't work in the same way, which is why a lot of the research that's done on animals is absolutely irrelevant anyway. And I do think that within the industry, there is some perhaps reluctance to change from things that have been done for years and years, but it's not actually the best way anymore. It's more expensive in many cases. It delays things unnecessarily, and it's not as relevant, and you don't get as fast or as good results as if you do human relevant testing. And they're developing some fantastic methods of that now. It just needs more investment.
Thank you, Jane. Last week, I mentioned that I became active in politics in the early 1990s. When I decided that, I don't know whether it was on the programme, I think it may have been at the branch meeting. I became active in politics in the early 1990s, and it was when the Tory government closed the mines, having promised us that they had no intention during the mining strike of doing so. But actually, Jane, the thing that motivated me to get interested and active was I went on a march against animal testing in 1992. That was the first thing I ever did, which was the motivation of me. And you're absolutely correct in what you say. Most of the testing that goes on animals is useless. Partly because the animals are so terrified that the response is not even relevant for an animal, never mind for the human beings. And so once they've tested it on animals, they then have to move on and test it on humans anyway. However, Mark, is it ever right to test on animals?
Oh, it's a bit of a tricky question, as with what Jane said about this new company, but I have to be very careful, because if I say no, I could be a bit of a hypocrite, because going back to the early 1910, a bit later than that probably, so late 19 teens, Frederick Banting in Toronto was catching stray dogs and doing operations on them, removing their pancreas, because he knew that was roughly where insulin came from. And if it wasn't for that, and that's why you used to have cow and pork insulin up until just before I was diagnosed. But as Jane is saying, there are now human analogues, and hopefully that can be used more. We'll have to see. Obviously, there will always be some room for testing on animals with medicines. Is it something we're going to have to get and bear? Time will tell. I don't know, but it has been used. But hopefully now we are coming to a point where, with computer technology, maybe AI, can that be used as well? I think it's a very hard question to fully answer at this stage.
When I was teaching the history of medicine, and I can't remember his name, which is disgraceful, isn't it? But the surgeon that pioneered heart transplant techniques, they started off, and what they would do is they would cool down the patient to slow the heartbeat, which would just give them time to go in and operate on the heart and get out before the heart responded and basically went into shock and died. And the first 10 the first tranche of 10 operations he did, every single one died. And the second tranche of 10 operations he did, 4 of them died. And the third tranche of 10 operations he did, none of them died. And the only difference between tranches 1 and 2 and 3 was that tranches 1 and 2 were on dogs, and tranche 3 was on human beings. It's very difficult to say we will never test on animals. I agree with Mark, but I absolutely agree with Jane that 9/10 of what they do is unnecessary and actually gives counter values. Kerry, one thing that worries me is, are we looking at a general waning of hostility to cruelty to animals, or is this just a one-off lapse by the government?
Well, the government don't give a hoot about human beings, so they're not going to give a hoot about animals, are they? So I'd rather see like 13.4 million people live in poverty
Thank you very much. This month, oh, sorry, Mark, go on. Yes.
I was going to say, let's use capitalism against them. If these, the way that animal testing was seen out was by people buying things which were not tested on animals. Who remembers Body Shop, etc. So, we have to sometimes, we don't like it, but let's use capitalism against them. If they don't say they're tested on, if it says not tested on animals, people need to buy it. If it doesn't, then we assume it has been, and so the sales should drop. Does that make sense? Am I?
Yes. Well, I mean, that's how they got rid of slavery. They stopped buying sugar. This month, everybody, something is happening at the United Nations. The UN Convention on the Rights of the Child is debating the content of the draft General Comment number 26 on children's rights. And
I know all about all this.
The European Link Coalition has asked that the words "protect the child," not only it might not just say "protect the child from all forms of violence." They want it to read "protect the child from all forms of violence, including violence inflicted on an animal." And this is absolutely massive, because cruelty to animals is the biggest indicator of becoming a serial killer, more than background and even domestic violence towards your partner. It's absolutely radical. And if we can stop children witnessing violence to animals, then they will grow up different people. And the UN's debating it this May, and we'll keep you. I'm in touch with that, and I'll keep you in touch with it. Really major. Ladies and gentlemen, Justicios, Mark, Jane, Kerry, we find ourselves on time. I wonder how we've got on time. I wonder who wasn't present today that we've managed to finish on time so efficiently. It's the
dailies, John. It's the dailies. They're a bad influence.
Can't stop talking. Come back, Paul and Laura, as soon as possible. All is forgiven. But in the meantime, I have to thank the three people who've done just so brilliantly, haven't they? Mark Longley.
Yep. Can I just say? Sorry to jump in. Just noticed. I'm probably going to say his name wrong. It's Tataya's just come in. He's the guy. If you ever see him, he's always wearing red. Sometimes a Corbyn t-shirt at the World Transformed, and he brings so much joy into the comrades. And I'd just like to say thank you to him, because it's so good to always see him there. And it's a shame you were late, comrade, but it's great to have you, and keep adding your patch to our patchwork world. And I just, sorry to jump in with that, but I just...
No, solidarity, and thank you so much, and thank you to that person. God bless you. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for being here. And Kerry, God bless you. Thank you so much for your contribution today.
I've kept still tonight. I'm sorry for last week.
So
and I've had no disco lights going on. I need to learn to wash my hair on a Tuesday, though, don't I?
No, you look gorgeous. Don't worry. The sort of
have you got the right glasses on there?
And to all the justice here, you're absolutely great. Normally, I would hand it over to Paul at this point, and he'd talk about the importance of joining Socialist Think Tank and buying their merchandise. And please do, and donations welcome, because independent media is so important, and the words we speak are different to what comes out of the mainstream media, And even when we're on, it's important that there are different voices out there. Thank you. See you next week. Don't miss next week. It's so important. And I think we're going to say bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Keep the red flag flying here.